Hello and welcome, I'm Blatant Void and today I'm going to discuss why you should consider moving from console to PC. With both Microsoft and Sony bringing out more powerful revisions to their consoles only a few years into the current generation, I don't think there's ever been a better time for core gamers to make the move to PC. Now I'm not a PC master race elitist. I've owned many consoles over the years and had a great time with all of them, except for CDI, which was a horrible mistake. But right now, the big two are looking more and more like inferior PCs. One of the main benefits of gaming consoles was that they set a standard that held for the duration of that console generation. You could buy, at launch, safe in the knowledge that your machine would play anything until the next version, 5 to 8 years later. Both the PS4 and Xbox One launched in November 2013, later in some territories. It's been only 3 years since then. Microsoft is releasing the Xbox One S this August, which is mostly a typical mid-cycle revision, smaller and with some extras, such as 4K Blu-ray and HDR video output. Although reputedly it might have a small performance increase as well, there's contradictory sources on that at the moment. Then they are releasing Project Scorpio next year. We don't have a complete picture on the Scorpio yet, but it does look to be a very substantial upgrade, although exactly what it will be capable of we won't know until it's out. Microsoft are claiming it as a 4K gaming machine, however given just how demanding 4K is at 60 frames per second and above, we most likely will see games running at either 1080p at 60 FPS or 4K at 30 FPS on the console at best. Right now, single GPU setups simply can't reliably maintain 60 FPS at 4K without compromising elsewhere, not even the very powerful GTX 1080 which costs over £600. But despite this, it looks safe to assume that the new machine will launch at a substantially higher price point than the existing consoles did, and Microsoft is keeping quiet on that front for now. Sony's revision, codenamed the PlayStation Neo, is also going to bring a substantial increase in power, though from the information that has leaked so far, they haven't been very forthcoming on their plans yet, it doesn't look like it will be anywhere close to as drastic a leap as Microsoft is making. This will be a reversal of the current situation, where the PS4 has had a noticeable performance lead over the Xbox One. Sony chief executive Andrew House has already confirmed that it will be more expensive than the existing model. In the past, developers had one hardware configuration to target, so in most cases you could expect reasonable performance for the duration. And usually we saw developers squeezing more performance out of the machines well into their lifespans as they became more familiar with their quirks and found tricks to get the most out of them. It looks like those days are behind us, and I expect people sticking with the launch models to start seeing less acceptable results once the new hardware launches. We've already seen something like this occurring with the new 3DS, where titles like Hyrule Warriors run extremely poorly on the older model, even though it's not sold as an exclusive for the new model. This, coupled with the fact that we've already seen developers become ever more reliant on patches in recent years, leads me to think it's safe to expect that further fragmentation in the hardware setups they're targeting will make it increasingly likely that people with the older equipment will lose out. At the same time, we may see the new models held back somewhat in order for games to still be playable on the base hardware, reducing the value proposition of the upgrade. None of this is new when it comes to PC gaming, where you've always been able to pay a premium for a better experience and the hardware never stands still. However, what's changing is the economic proposition of the consoles. Now, if you're someone content with the launch models, that's great, it'll keep your costs down. Likewise, you may not have already bought in, and the new models might be a better value to you as a result, at least until the next version. But for those who already have a console and are itching for a bit more power, enough so that you are considering replacing your launch unit, seriously consider switching to a PC. First of all, the potential increase in power on PC is and always will be greater than any console. Console manufacturers are very limited both by physical restrictions on the machines, such as the need to make them small and only being able to use fan cooling, and most of all by price. There's an upper limit to how much you can charge while targeting the mass market. With PC gaming, the sky's the limit if you have enough money. You can go out and buy 2 bleeding edge graphics cards, water cool and overclock them for all they're worth. But more importantly, affordable mid-range hardware is increasingly available at competitive prices. We'll return to this point a little later, but first let's start working out the true cost of console gaming. Now, many of you probably waited for a good sale to pick up your current console, but I suspect that those most tempted by the Xbox Scorpio and PlayStation Neo, or whatever they are eventually called, are likely to have been early adopters. In the UK, the Xbox One cost £429 at launch, while the PlayStation 4 cost £349. I'm using the UK price as that's where I'm based. While the specific prices vary, you will probably find the general ratios in costs given throughout this will be reflected in your region. We already know that the Neo will be more expensive, and it's a near certainty that the Scorpio will be as well. But as we don't have hard numbers, let's go with an implausible best case scenario of them both costing the same again, in order to set a minimum. That means we're looking at £700 sunk into buying both versions of the PS4 and £860 on the Xbox side of things. That would be for two consoles, not including if you did the S in the middle, which would be crazy. Now, let's consider the subscription fees to play online, something that costs nothing on PC except for a few specific MMOs, which, where console versions exist, such as Final Fantasy XIV, also carry an additional fee, so this is a moot point. PlayStation Plus and Xbox Live Gold cost £40 a year. Assuming you bought a console at launch and started a subscription then, you've already paid £120 in fees, with more years to come, and in all likelihood you've had a subscription prior to that, maybe even as far back as the first Xbox. Over a 5-year period, you're looking at £200 in fees you simply wouldn't be paying on the PC. For someone who bought the original model, the new version, and played each for 3 years apiece online, you're already looking at close to £1,000, and that's before games and peripherals are considered. Next we have the price of games in general. Regional pricing varies, but the general pattern is, again, likely the same where you live. When it comes to digital pricing, the PC space is much more competitive than the closed markets of the PlayStation Network and Xbox Live. As a result, you can expect to pay substantially less on new games. The gap between retail games and PC isn't as big, mostly thanks to fierce competition among online retailers, at least as far as the UK is concerned. But it is still typical to see multi-platform titles selling £5 to £10 cheaper than boxed console titles, and at worst they cost the same. As a general rule, on PC you can expect more frequent and deeper sales on digital titles too. The more games you buy, the bigger difference this will make, and it will vary tremendously between individuals and where they choose to shop. But you can be confident that when buying new, you will routinely pay less on PC. Additionally, customer treatment is improving in the digital marketplace on PC. For instance, on the Xbox Marketplace and PlayStation Network, all digital purchases are final, excluding pre-orders which can at least be cancelled, whereas on some of the most popular PC storefronts, including Steam and Origin, you can now get a refund within a certain window. Though make sure you check the refund policy wherever you choose to shop, as the specifics vary and some like Uplay still don't offer this. Elsewhere, GOG tries to be fair with regional pricing, either setting the local price to be the same as the American equivalent, or where that is impossible for one reason or another, giving a credit for the difference. Humble Bundle regularly offers excellent collections on a tiered pay-what-you-want system, with a percentage of the money going to good causes. These are some of the best known, there are many others, but the point is that in the PC space, you have choices when it comes to buying digital, and thanks to this competition, consumers can find better treatment and better deals, whereas on console you are locked into one storefront and are at the mercy of a platform provider. Backwards compatibility. Backwards compatibility on consoles is hit and miss, and where it does exist, it rarely lasts more than 2 generations at a time. Both current consoles launched with no backwards compatibility, but are gradually correcting that. Currently, the Xbox One uses software emulation to support a growing number of Xbox 360 titles, a list of which can be found below this video. No original Xbox games are currently supported, but it's not unlikely that we'll see some eventually. Due to the nature of Microsoft's approach of essentially making the Xbox One mimic a 360, these games perform as they did on the old console, so where titles such as Mass Effect had frame rate drops and other performance issues on the original hardware, you'll still see those on the new hardware. It's the same approach as on the 360, which used software emulation to support select original Xbox titles, though in that case some support was present from launch. Though that some titles, like GTA Vice City, had considerable performance issues when emulated that were not present on the original hardware. This is a pitfall with software emulation. The PS4 has no real backwards compatibility at present, and it looks unlikely that it'll ever get it. Instead, Sony offer a rental service where you can stream select PS3 titles, which can be a suboptimal experience depending on your internet connection. This option is also available on some of their televisions. They've also started porting PS2 titles, which have improved performance mostly thanks to upscaling on the PS4. However, these all require repurchasing, and so should be considered ports rather than examples of actual backwards compatibility. And furthermore, the selection is currently extremely limited. PS1 games remain unavailable, which is bizarre considering both the PS3 and Vita could easily emulate the PS1, and many PS1 games were made available digitally through the PSN as a result. If I had to speculate, I suspect that Sony have to renegotiate licenses in order to bring these titles to the PS4, and simply don't see enough profit in doing so. So on both the major consoles, backwards compatibility is spotty at best, if not non-existent. This diminishes one of the factors behind sticking with a given family of consoles, the idea of losing your library. The PC is the king of backwards compatibility. If you've ever owned a title, the odds are that you're still able to run it. Though with very old titles, you might need to put in a small amount of work to do so. Better yet, if you missed out on classic titles, you can easily find them at low prices on services like Good Old Games, who continually patch old titles so that they run on current operating systems. Perhaps best of all, the vast majority of games benefit from the increased power of modern hardware, allowing you to play at higher frame rates and resolutions, and to dial up all the other settings such as anti-aliasing. In some cases, you can find modders have made freely available graphical overhauls that enhance the original, or in some cases make it look like a new title. Given how many ports and remasters of last-gen games we've seen in the last two console generations, being able to revisit older titles at no extra cost with improved performance should be seen as a considerable selling point for the PC. Furthermore, you can be safe in the knowledge that anything you buy today, you'll likely still be able to come back to years from now, regardless of how many times you upgrade your hardware. With consoles, you'll be lucky if the next version offers out-of-box support for current games, let alone earlier ones. And in all likelihood, you'll have to pay for a new port or remaster if you want to play an old title, if it's made available at all. Peripherals. When gaming on PC, you can choose from a vast selection of peripherals, and as with software, many older pieces of equipment can be made to work with newer hardware, though in some cases you'll need some sort of converter if your motherboard doesn't support a particular input type, and possibly some drivers too. USB peripherals tend to just work, including many intended for consoles. The Xbox 360, Xbox One, and PS4 controller all work with most modern PC games via USB, especially the multi-platform releases. Obviously, some genres don't lend themselves to controllers, so don't expect universal support. The 360 controller is actually the de facto standard on PC, so if you have one, or its successor, you can plug and play in the vast majority of cases. The PS4 controller in many cases requires the use of a free program such as DS4 Windows or Input Mapper in order to get the best results, but this is easily accomplished. I've posted links below. The PS4 controller can also connect to your computer via Bluetooth if your PC supports it, and if it doesn't already, you can find cheap dongles to add this functionality. If you wish to continue using a controller, you can do so at no additional cost. Moreover, you also have other options that you will likely find make for a better playing experience with some games, such as mouse and keyboard or a flight stick. The consoles don't typically support previous generation peripherals, though there are some exceptions. While on PC, with USB, this isn't an issue outside of the occasional need for drivers, most of which are installed automatically now. This makes buying an expensive peripheral like an arcade stick or racing wheel a much safer prospect in the long term. A new console usually means having to buy new peripherals. A new PC will work with your old ones. So as we've seen, on top of the potential for more power and a wider selection of games old and new, the biggest advantage consoles hold over PC gaming, the cost, isn't so clear-cut, especially if the market moves into a mobile phone-like upgrade cycle, which is where it definitely seems to be heading. The initial cost of a PC is higher than the buy-in on a console, this is true, but having considered the outlay involved in replacing a console, plus the subscription fees, that difference is much less pronounced. For the sake of comparison, let's forget all the other things you can do on a PC, which add to its value, and consider it purely as a gaming machine. PC upgrades are modular. Now this is creeping into the console space a little with the ability to replace your hard drive from the last two PlayStations, but it's unlikely to go much further than that, if at all. On console, if you want a more powerful machine, you have to replace the whole unit, even if only one or two parts have changed that are relevant to you. On PC, you can change anything you like as long as it's compatible with your motherboard, and you can replace that too, and you can choose from multiple suppliers, which means there's competition in the market, which helps keep prices down. By far the most important factor in game performance currently is your graphics card. Modern processors tend to have a longer usability lifespan than their 90s counterparts, and in most cases aren't as critical as the games. though again there are a few exceptions. With most relatively new computers, if gaming is your primary concern, then simply swapping out your GPU for a newer, more powerful model will yield substantial improvements without having to change anything else. Now, graphics cards can cost more than entire consoles, but you are getting substantially more power for your money, and there are some very competitively priced cards entering the market currently and in the near future. Very shortly, the AMD RX 480 is launching at $199, which is extremely good value considering its performance should be roughly equivalent to somewhere between an Nvidia GTX 970 and the 980. We don't have a British price yet, but converting and adding VAT at 20% should make it around £164, though markup is always possible if not likely. Essentially what that card means is a solid 60 FPS at 1080p on anything you care to throw it at, with optional settings dialed way up from the console versions, higher ultra on most games. It also runs on just 150 watts, so you can be conservative with your power supply too, if you're building a new system. Now you may be thinking, so what? I'm used to playing at 1080p. And that would be understandable because the console manufacturers have been misleading buyers on that point since the last generation. In actuality, many games on the current systems do not run at the native 1080p, instead using lower resolutions or variable resolutions in order to sustain a frame rate. Even more commonly, most console games only run at 30 frames a second, and are struggling to even maintain that. Before anyone starts complaining that they don't care about frame rate and or graphics, I'm not here to evangelise higher frame rates and how they benefit gaming, though they absolutely do. This video is intended for people who are interested in moving to more powerful hardware. Again, if you're happy with your current setup, I'm very happy for you. If you're interested in replacing your console under your TV, say you just prefer playing on a couch than at your desk, you can absolutely do that, and potentially save buying on a monitor, though you likely already have a monitor you could use at that. Most modern graphics cards have a HDMI port. Simply connect that to your HDTV and that's that. Nowadays, the Steam client even has a dedicated big picture mode, which is an interface specifically designed for TV usage. Additionally, if you want the computer at your desk and don't want to move it around but still want to game on TV, you can get a Steam Link and stream to your television, though there is a hit to performance with this method. What about exclusives? Well, first of all, Windows PCs have by far the highest number of exclusive games of any platform. There are entire genres that rarely if ever appear on consoles, such as flight sims and real-time strategy games. In fact, there's never been a better time to play on PC, as most of the so-called exclusive console games now receive PC ports, often releasing on the same day. Given that the PC can offer more powerful hardware, with the exception of poorly ported games, the PC version is usually the best. Rise, Dead Rising 3, Gears of War Ultimate, Rise of the Tomb Raider, Quantum Break, Killer Instinct, Titanfall, Street Fighter V, Dragon Quest Heroes, Guilty Gear Xrd, or however that's pronounced, and many more games marketed as exclusive to the Xbox One or the PS4 are available on the PC. Most forthcoming exclusives, including highly anticipated titles like No Man's Sky, Gears of War 4, Forza Horizon 3 and Halo Wars 2 have already been announced as coming to PC too. In fact, at this year's E3, every game at Microsoft's conference was confirmed to be coming to Windows 10. So, on PC you can enjoy most of the console exclusives from either side, though admittedly Sony are still being protective with their first-party offerings and can be expected to continue doing so. Truly console exclusive games are now the exception, and of those, fewer still can be considered great games, though there are definitely still a few such as Bloodborne. Ultimately, this is the most subjective part of choosing a platform. Technology and price can be compared, but which games you love varies immensely from person to person. What I would say is to check whether there's anything you truly must have right now. Not hyped games coming in the future, as those may disappoint, but what's actually available at the time of purchase. If there's only one or two games that you really want that can't be played anywhere else, I personally don't find that a good value proposition. There's also a great deal to be said for variety. There's all sorts of games and genres waiting to be discovered that can become favourites, and the place with the widest selection, and therefore the most likely for those to be found, is again the PC. Now, I still see people wary of PC gaming as they are concerned it's too technical. I don't really think this is the case anymore. The days of having to hunt for patches are mostly gone. Clients like Steam will download patches automatically, as will Windows. Both graphics cards manufacturers include software that can alert you when a new driver is available and install it for you. You also have the added benefit of the PC community fixing games, releasing patches faster than the original developer in many cases, if an official fix comes at all, while on console you'll be beholden to the developer alone. This is somewhat counterbalanced, with publishers sometimes not taking adequate care with PC ports, or not bothering to update them. Warner Bros. Interactive has started to become infamous for this, but given the performance issues we've seen on this generation of consoles, I personally still consider the PC to be the safer bet overall. Really, the main element that requires any more knowledge than consoles is simply checking whether a game will run on your hardware. This information is freely available, and most of the time simply requires you to see whether your processor and GPU are a higher model number than the stated minimum, which really takes no time to learn. And with modern refund policies on things like Steam, even if it doesn't end up running, you can easily get a refund now. On PC, games offer you performance options to take advantage of more powerful hardware, but these also allow you to prioritize what you want to sacrifice on lower-end machines. For example, you might prefer to maintain a higher frame rate at the expense of resolution. You don't get to make those choices on console, they are made for you by the developer, and it's blind luck if they match your preferences. Sometimes these options can be simply a matter of personal taste. For example, I don't like the implementation of motion blur on many games. On PC, I have the option of turning that down or off entirely. There is a little technical jargon to learn, but the meaning of things like anti-aliasing and the various techniques for it, or VSync, are just a Google search away. It's a matter of seconds to minutes to learn these things, and that's if you decide to fiddle with the settings at all. Something else that might interest you is VR. If you're interested in VR, the PC gives you options. Currently, the Oculus Rift and the HTC Vive, with probably many more to come. The latter offering impressive room scale functionality. Microsoft currently has no plans for VR that I'm aware of. They're pursuing augmented reality instead, while Sony are bringing out a headset for the PS4 this year. Currently, PlayStation VR is set to be the cheapest of the first three at £350 compared to £500 for the Oculus and a whopping £689 for the Vive. However, the PlayStation VR requires the additional purchase of a PlayStation camera and the optional purchase of Move controllers, increasing the price by at least £50. I personally haven't jumped into VR yet, and I probably won't in the near future, but I do know that maintaining a high frame rate of 90 FPS or above is essential to prevent motion sickness. To accomplish that on weaker hardware, sacrifices to graphical quality are going to be necessary. I also think it's safe to expect that the library of available PC VR titles will be greater than what will arrive on PlayStation, though there will likely be a few impressive exclusives there. Frankly speaking, given the early stage we're in with VR, everything is pretty speculative and early adopters are likely to get burned in one way or another. So my advice for most of you would be to hold off and see how things are looking a little down the road. If you are itching to jump in and want the best experience, the early verdict seems to be PC and the HTC Vive is the way to go. If you want to use your computer with a TV, especially if it's a recent 4K model, you should check if your GPU supports HDCP 2.2. This is a copyright protection standard that will affect your ability to play back 4K video and can limit the frame rate on games in some cases if you don't have it. With HDCP2, all parts of the chain require it, both your TV and GPU. If you only intend to stick to the current HD standard of 1080p, this won't be an issue, but it is worth looking into if you want to build a high-end machine or are looking to buy into 4K Blu-ray. If you're going to be using your machine with a regular monitor, this won't be a problem for you when it comes to gaming. But it is likely that you won't be able to play 4K Blu-rays without it. Though at present there isn't any software to do so on the PC in any case, it's very early days for 4K Blu-ray. Now, as with anything, there are a couple of exceptions to all of this. For instance, if you have young children who you want to share the system with, consoles still have a lower technical barrier to entry than a gaming PC. While the jump isn't very high anymore, the consoles are designed to be as simple to use as possible. They also provide easy to access and set up parental controls if that's important to you. One potential negative I feel I would be remiss if I didn't bring up is that you do need to factor in the cost of a copy of Windows if you really want to get the most out of a gaming PC. And if you want to access the ports of the Xbox One exclusives, that needs to be Windows 10, at least in the foreseeable future. I mostly bring this up as I see a lot of people posting PC builds that are equivalent to consoles or better, but neglecting to include the cost of the operating system. There are free alternatives like SteamOS and other Linux builds, but support is still relatively poor and you can get worse performance than you see on the same hardware running DirectX. More and more games are making their way to Apple systems, but the selection is still limited and you pay a premium over what you would for the equivalent hardware on an unbranded PC. On the positive side, stores like Steam don't separate titles by OS, so you can buy once and still enjoy your purchase if you switch operating systems, or run multiple machines, provided it's available in the first place. You can easily check for this with the little icons next to the games in the storefront. Finally, some of you may have found the absence of any mention of Nintendo in this conspicuous. There are a number of reasons I didn't include them. First, I think the market overlap between the PlayStation and the Xbox brands and the games released on PC is much more clear than on Nintendo. The overwhelming majority of games released now are multi-platform, with vanishingly few exceptions. Current games come to PC. We're even starting to see PlayStation Vita exclusives getting ported, such as Danganronpa. If there's a genre you enjoy on PS4 or Xbox, you'll find it represented on PC. Furthermore, people who seek more performance can get that on PC. But Nintendo's consoles have been comparatively the weakest on the market since the days of the GameCube, so their fans are less likely to be concerned with high-end performance in the first place. This generation, third-party support for Nintendo's console offering, the Wii U, either dried up early on, as we saw with Ubisoft, or never existed in the first place. Big publishers including EA and Bethesda boycotted the machine entirely. Nintendo itself publishes some exceptionally good games, and they never port them to non-Nintendo consoles or the PC. As a result, fans of Nintendo's games either have to buy their hardware or miss out. Likewise, the dedicated handheld space, which is currently dominated by the 3DS, is a separate market and is often a complementary purchase rather than the main gaming platform the person uses. Furthermore, at present the Wii U is essentially dead in the water, and Nintendo is keeping tight-lipped about its successor, currently known as the NX. For good or ill, Nintendo marches to the beat of its own drum, so I wouldn't expect it to compete directly with Microsoft and Sony's platforms, but Nintendo are weird, so who knows what they're planning. Unless you have young children or are a big fan of Nintendo games, I don't see it as a primary console for most, but thanks to most other games being on PC already, you may find it enticing thanks to those Nintendo exclusives. Finally, I'd just like to say I've personally enjoyed gaming on both console and PC. In fact, I'm pretty certain I've spent more hours on console over the years, at least up until this point. I certainly don't think opting for a console is wrong. It really depends on what aspect a given person values in their particular circumstances. But with the major consoles becoming lesser versions of PCs, and I really do think that's the case, I wanted to put out this video to encourage people interested in the new hardware to take another look at their options. Ultimately, I think that's the true strength of the PC space: choice. I've been Blatant Void, thank you for watching.